You think you know history. You think you know how the world began, how civilizations rose and fell, how we got here. But what if I told you that the history of the entire world, I guess, is nothing like what you learned in school? What if everything you've been taught is just a fraction of the real story? A carefully edited version designed to keep you from asking the questions that matter. The truth is, the history of the entire world, I guess, contains secrets so profound they could shatter your understanding of who you are and where you came from. Today we're diving into the complete, unfiltered history of the entire world, I guess. But not the version in your textbooks. We're talking about the hidden timeline, the suppressed discoveries, the connections between ancient civilizations that mainstream historians refuse to acknowledge. What really happened in our past? How did humanity truly begin? Why do all ancient cultures share eerily similar stories about gods from the sky? Is it possible that the history of the entire world, I guess, has been deliberately obscured to hide our true origins? This isn't just another history lesson. This is an investigation into the buried truth about the history of the entire world. I guess, the one they don't want you to know. In 1952, a rogue archaeologist named Dr. Marcus Whitfield made a discovery that would cost him his career. While excavating in the Mesopotamian desert, he uncovered tablets that didn't match any known historical timeline. These tablets suggested that the history of the entire world, I guess, was far older and far stranger than anyone imagined. Whitfield spent the next 30 years of his life trying to piece together what he called the true chronicle, a complete history of the entire world. I guess that included civilizations predating the Sumerians by tens of thousands of years. His colleagues called him mad. Universities revoked his credentials, but Whitfield kept digging, kept translating, kept connecting dots that spanned continents and millennia. "They're hiding something," he wrote in his final journal entry. "The history of the entire world, I guess, isn't what we think it is. It can't be. The evidence is everywhere, but they refuse to see it." According to Whitfield's research, the history of the entire world, I guess, begins not 6,000 years ago, but possibly 200,000 years ago or more. He claimed that advanced civilizations rose and fell in cycles, each one reaching heights of technology and spirituality before being wiped out by cataclysmic events. The tablets he found spoke of the first builders, beings who shaped the early history of the entire world, I guess, by constructing monuments we still can't explain today. These weren't primitive humans. These were sophisticated architects who understood mathematics, astronomy, and engineering at levels that would make modern scientists uncomfortable. But here's where it gets strange. Every ancient culture, Sumerian, Egyptian, Mayan, Hindu, Chinese, they all tell variations of the same story. They all claim their knowledge came from those who came before. They all point to a shared origin point in the history of the entire world, I guess, that predates their own civilizations by eons. Let's look at the evidence that supports this alternative history of the entire world, I guess. First, there's the impossible architecture. The pyramids of Giza, Puma Punku in Bolivia, Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. These structures were built with precision that defies explanation given the supposed primitive tools available. But what if they're remnants from an earlier chapter in the history of the entire world, I guess? Then there's the linguistic evidence. Dr. Whitfield discovered that certain root words appear in languages that supposedly had no contact with each other. Words for sky, God, and teacher share uncanny similarities across continents. It's as if the entire history of the entire world, I guess, shares a common linguistic ancestor that predates known civilization. Consider the maps. The Peary race map from 1513 shows Antarctica without ice, something that should have been impossible to know. Unless, of course, this knowledge was passed down from an earlier period in the history of the entire world, I guess, when the continent was ice-free. There's also the genetic anomaly. Human DNA contains segments that scientists call junk DNA, portions that seem to serve no purpose. But what if these segments are actually dormant codes from an earlier phase in the history of the entire world, I guess? What if they're waiting to be activated? Finally, the flood myths. Over 200 cultures worldwide have flood stories that are remarkably similar. A great deluge that reset the history of the entire world, I guess. Survivors who had to rebuild from scratch, knowledge that was lost forever. Coincidence? Or collective memory? But critics weren't convinced. Mainstream archaeologists pointed out that Whitfield's tablets were never independently verified. They argued that similarities between ancient cultures could be explained by parallel evolution. Humans facing similar challenges would naturally develop similar solutions and stories. The history of the entire world, I guess, is already well documented, said Professor Elena Rodriguez from Oxford. We don't need fantasy theories about lost civilizations. The evidence we have paints a clear picture of human development from hunter-gatherers to modern society. Scientists also noted that the precision of ancient monuments could be achieved with simple tools and enough manpower. The flood myths? Natural disasters happen everywhere. Of course, cultures would have similar stories. As for the DNA, they insisted that junk DNA is simply evolutionary leftovers, nothing more mysterious than wisdom teeth. But what if the skeptics were wrong? What if their dismissal of alternative theories about the history of the entire world, I guess, is exactly what keeps us from seeing the truth? There was one thing they didn't count on: the underwater discoveries. In recent decades, we've found massive structures beneath the oceans, off the coasts of Japan, India, and Cuba. These aren't natural formations. They're clearly architectural, with right angles, stairs, and corridors. But here's the problem. They've been underwater for at least 12,000 years, placing them in a period of the history of the entire world, I guess, when humans were supposedly just learning agriculture. Then came the impossible artifact discoveries. The Antikythera mechanism, an ancient Greek computer too advanced for its time. The Baghdad batteries, electrical devices from 2,000 years ago. Crystal skulls with properties we can't replicate. Each one suggests that the history of the entire world, I guess, included knowledge and technology that was somehow lost and rediscovered. This is where Whitfield's research took a turn that destroyed his credibility, but might have revealed the ultimate truth about the history of the entire world, I guess. The tablets spoke of visitors from beyond the celestial sphere, who arrived during humanity's infancy. These beings didn't just visit, they intervened. They altered us. According to the texts, modern humans are not a product of natural evolution alone. We are hybrids, engineered by these visitors who needed a workforce intelligent enough to follow complex instructions, but obedient enough to serve. The history of the entire world, I guess, might actually be the history of an experiment in consciousness, in potential, in creating a species that could eventually reach the stars themselves. The junk DNA? It's not junk. It's programming, waiting for the right trigger to unlock abilities we can't imagine. This would explain everything. Our rapid brain development, our obsession with the sky, our universal myths about gods who walked among us. The history of the entire world, I guess, is the story of humanity's true parents, and they weren't from Earth. The evidence becomes overwhelming when you examine myths across cultures through this lens. The Sumerians spoke of the Anunnaki, those who from heaven came. The Hindu texts describe vimanas, flying vehicles used by the gods. The Book of Enoch details watchers who descended to Earth and took human wives. The Dogon tribe of Africa has known about the Sirius star system's invisible companion for centuries. Knowledge they claim came from visitors. These aren't isolated stories. They're chapters in the same book, the real history of the entire world, I guess. A history where advanced beings guided human development, shared selective knowledge, and then mysteriously vanished, leaving only traces in our myths, monuments, and DNA. The Aboriginal Australians talk about the dream time, when creator beings walk the earth. The Hopi speak of the star people who helped them survive cataclysms. Chinese legends tell of dragon kings who emerge from the sky to teach civilization. Every culture, every continent, every era in the history of the entire world, I guess, echoes the same narrative. We are not alone, and we never were. But then came the Great Forgetting. Around 12,000 years ago, something catastrophic happened that reset the history of the entire world, I guess. The Younger Dryas, a sudden ice age that shouldn't have occurred. Sea levels rose 400 feet. Advanced coastal civilizations vanished beneath the waves. The few survivors were thrown back into primitivism, clutching fragments of knowledge they could barely understand. Imagine it. Libraries of accumulated wisdom, swept away in floods, technologies powered by principles we've forgotten, buried under miles of mud. An entire chapter of the history of the entire world, I guess, erased in a geological instant. The teachers, whether alien, interdimensional, or simply more advanced humans, were gone. Humanity was orphaned, left to piece together its identity from ruins and half-remembered stories. This is why ancient texts speak with such longing about a golden age before the flood. This is why pyramid cultures spontaneously emerged worldwide, as if trying to recreate something half-remembered. The history of the entire world, I guess, has a massive gap, a traumatic amnesia that we're only now beginning to heal. Modern science, of course, rejects all of this. Geologists insist the Younger Dryas was a natural climate event. Anthropologists maintain that human evolution followed a predictable path. Astronomers see no evidence of ancient alien contact. According to them, the history of the entire world, I guess, is exactly what the textbooks say. A slow climb from caves to cities, with no mysterious interventions. They point to carbon dating, geological layers, the fossil record. They explain away underwater structures as natural formations. They dismiss ancient astronomical knowledge as lucky guesses. In their version of the history of the entire world, I guess, there are no mysteries, only misunderstandings. But if this never existed, why do so many cultures say the same thing? Why do the myths align so perfectly? Why do we find the same symbols, the same architectural principles, the same obsession with the stars across civilizations that supposedly never interacted? How do you explain the mathematical precision of monuments built when humans were supposedly barely literate? Perhaps the truth about the history of the entire world, I guess, lies somewhere between the extremes. Maybe there wasn't alien intervention, but there was an advanced human civilization that we've forgotten. The Sunderland hypothesis suggests that when sea levels were lower, a massive landmass existed in Southeast Asia, a cradle of civilization that sank, sending refugees across the globe with advanced knowledge. Or perhaps the monuments and myths are symbolic rather than literal. Maybe the gods from the sky represent consciousness itself, the moment humans became self-aware and began to question their existence. The history of the entire world, I guess, might be the story of awakening rather than intervention. Some researchers propose that the similarities across cultures come from a shared psychedelic experience. Ancient peoples using consciousness-altering plants might have accessed the same archetypal visions, creating parallel mythologies. In this view, the history of the entire world, I guess, is shaped by inner space as much as outer space. But here's what should really make you question everything. What if your DNA carries traces of this hidden history? What if the history of the entire world, I guess, is written in your very cells, waiting to be decoded? Scientists have found that human DNA contains viral fragments from millions of years ago. We literally carry our history within us. But what else might be encoded there? Do you really know where you came from? Can you be certain that the history of the entire world, I guess, as you've been taught it, tells the whole story? Every time you look at the stars and feel that inexplicable longing, every time you see ancient ruins and feel a connection you can't explain, that's your deep memory stirring. That's the real history of the entire world, I guess, calling to you across time. Could this change everything we thought about who we are? If even a fraction of this alternative history is true, it means we're not just the product of random evolution. We're part of something larger, something with purpose. The history of the entire world, I guess, might be leading somewhere specific, and we might be approaching a crucial moment in that journey. So I ask you, what do you believe about the history of the entire world, I guess? Are we alone in the universe, slowly evolving from primordial soup? Or are we the inheritors of a legacy so vast and strange that we've forgotten our own story? Look at the evidence. Feel the truth in your bones. The history of the entire world, I guess, is not just about the past. It's about who you are right now and who you might become. The answers aren't in textbooks. They're in the ruins no one can explain, in the myths that refuse to die, in the stars that call to us for reasons we can't articulate. Share your thoughts below. What pieces of the puzzle have you found? What connections have you made? Because if we're going to uncover the real history of the entire world, I guess, we need to do it together. The truth is out there, scattered across continents and centuries, waiting for us to piece it together. The history of the entire world, I guess, is your history, and it's far stranger than you ever imagined.